The billionaire, Charles Whitmore, lay pale and trembling in the most expensive private hospital suite money could buy. Machines beeped, monitors flashed, and 15 of the nation's top doctors circled his bed with furrowed brows. They whispered in frantic tones, flipping through charts, running test after test. But the truth was undeniable. No one could explain why the titan of industry was slipping away. His breaths grew shallower by the minute, and the doctors exchanged nervous glances, knowing they were powerless. Outside the room, employees, journalists, and family members waited anxiously, certain that even billions couldn't buy him more time. In the quiet corner of the hallway sat Elijah, the janitor's son. He was only 16, his skin dark and his clothes plain, but there was something in his sharp eyes that made people uneasy. His father, Samuel, had been scrubbing floors at the hospital for years, invisible to the powerful men and women who walked past. But Elijah was different. From a young age, he saw patterns in ways others couldn't, shapes in numbers, rhythms in breathing, hidden signals in chaos. Teachers called him a genius, but poverty and circumstance had kept his brilliance caged. Until now. As the doctors argued about whether to attempt another risky procedure, Elijah stood slowly, his gaze fixed on the screen displaying Charles's vitals. His heart hammered in his chest. He could see something the others couldn't. The rhythm wasn't random. It was a message, a silent code the billionaire's body was crying out. Elijah whispered to his father, "Dad, I know what's wrong with him." Samuel's eyes widened in fear. "Elijah, don't. These are the best doctors in the world. They won't listen to us." But Elijah clenched his fists. "Then I'll make them listen." He pushed open the door and stepped into the room, his small frame dwarfed by the machines and towering doctors. "Stop!" he cried, his voice cracking but urgent. The doctors turned, annoyed, some chuckling at the sight of the janitor's boy daring to interrupt. "This is no place for you," one snapped. But Elijah walked closer to the monitors, his eyes scanning the blinking lights. "You're treating him for the wrong thing," he said firmly. "His body isn't failing, it's reacting. Look at the patterns, it's not random, it's systemic." "You're missing the root cause," the lead doctor scoffed. "And what are you, boy? A prodigy from medical school we didn't know about?" Laughter rippled through the room. But Elijah didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "I'm someone who sees what you don't." He adjusted the machine settings with quick, confident hands, pointing out irregularities in the blood-oxygen patterns, matching them with environmental triggers. The billionaire's eyes fluttered open for a second, as if drawn to the boy's voice. Richard's fingers twitched weakly, like he was clinging to Elijah's words. Samuel burst into the room, panicked. "Elijah, stop! You'll get us both fired!" But then Charles's pulse began to stabilize ever so slightly. The room fell silent. The laughter vanished. The doctors leaned in, watching in disbelief as the boy explained, step by step, how Charles had been misdiagnosed. The billionaire wasn't suffering from heart failure, as they believed. It was a rare allergic reaction, triggered by a hidden chemical in his medication. The signs had been there all along, but only Elijah had seen the pattern. "Change his medication now," Elijah ordered, his voice steady. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard's monitor beeped steadily, stronger than before. One doctor grabbed the charts, muttering in shock, while another confirmed the boy's theory. "He's right," the doctor admitted, almost in disbelief. "This child just saved him." The lead physician, humbled and pale, barked out new instructions. Nurses scrambled, switching out the medications as Elijah stood silently, his chest rising and falling with quiet determination. Minutes later, Charles Whitmore opened his eyes fully, color returning to his face. The room gasped as he whispered hoarsely, Who saved me?" All eyes turned to Elijah, the janitor's son. The billionaire studied the boy for a long moment, then let out a weak but genuine laugh. "Of course. The genius no one saw." Tears blurred Samuel's vision as he clutched his son's shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. The janitor had scrubbed floors in silence for years, but his son had just outshone every doctor in the building. News spread like wildfire. A black janitor's son, dismissed by everyone, had solved what 15 of the world's best doctors could not. Cameras flooded the hospital, journalists begged for interviews, and whispers of "the boy who saved a billionaire" filled every hallway. But Elijah didn't bask in the glory. He simply said, "I didn't do it for money or fame. I did it because I couldn't watch someone die when I knew the answer. His humility only made the world listen harder. Charles Whitmore, grateful beyond measure, made a vow. From this day forward, you'll never be overlooked again, he told Elijah. He offered him a full scholarship to the best universities, mentorship, and a future no one could deny. Elijah smiled, clutching his father's hand, knowing this was only the beginning. Because sometimes genius doesn't wear a white coat or carry a degree. Sometimes it's a boy with sharp eyes, a kind heart, and the courage to speak when the world tells him to stay silent. Elijah's name shot across news headlines within hours. "Janitor's son saves billionaire!" the paper screamed. TV anchors called him a miracle, and universities sent letters offering him early admission. But with fame came shadows. Some of the very doctors he had embarrassed began whispering that it was just a fluke, claiming the boy had guessed. Others, threatened by his genius, worked behind the scenes to discredit him. Elijah overheard them once, hissing in a hospital corridor, "We can't let some janitor's kid make us look like fools." His chest tightened, but he lifted his chin. He had seen too much truth to back down now. Charles Whitmore, still recovering but growing stronger by the day, invited Elijah and Samuel to his mansion. The sprawling estate was like another world. Golden chandeliers, velvet carpets, rooms bigger than the apartment Elijah had lived in his whole life. "This house is yours too now," Charles declared, his voice hoarse but firm. "You saved me and I owe you everything. But more than that, Elijah, you belong in rooms like these. Not because of me, but because of who you are." Samuel stood silently beside his son, tears welling in his eyes. He had mopped floors for decades so his boy could dream. Now those dreams were unfolding before him. But not everyone wanted Elijah's rise. A pharmaceutical executive, furious that his medication had been exposed as dangerous, approached the boy one evening after a conference. "Stay quiet," he hissed, shoving an envelope thick with cash into Elijah's hands. "Take this and you'll never want for anything again. But if you keep talking about what you saw, it won't just be your future at risk. It'll be your father's too." Elijah's stomach churned. He had never held so much money in his life, but he shoved the envelope back with shaking hands. "My father taught me to clean floors, not consciences. I won't be bought." Days later, a smear campaign began. Articles suddenly appeared online questioning Elijah's intelligence, calling him a fraud, claiming the billionaire was exaggerating his role. Classmates who once admired him started whispering behind his back. Samuel noticed his son sitting awake at night, staring at the ceiling, his jaw tight with frustration. "Elijah," he said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed, "genius isn't about being loved. It's about holding on to truth when lies scream louder. Don't let them scare you into silence." Elijah swallowed hard, then nodded. His father's words wrapped around his heart like armor. The next week, Charles called a press conference. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium, his voice stronger than ever. "You all know I was at death's door. 15 doctors couldn't save me, but one boy did. His name is Elijah, the son of my janitor, and I will never let anyone call his gift a fluke." He pulled Elijah onto the stage, the world watching as he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "This young man doesn't just see what others miss. He has the courage to speak it, and I will make sure his light isn't dimmed by envy or fear." The crowd erupted in applause, and in that thunder, Elijah stood taller, knowing the world finally saw him for what he truly was. The applause from the press conference hadn't even faded before Elijah was thrust into a storm far greater than he had imagined. A week later, news broke that the governor's daughter had collapsed during a public event. She was rushed to the same hospital where Charles had nearly died. Once again, the world's finest doctors crowded around her bed, but every treatment failed. Her body convulsed with seizures, her pulse dipping dangerously. The governor, a man who trusted no one, was frantic. "Do whatever it takes," he barked at the medical team. But fear laced his words, because his daughter's life was slipping away by the minute. Elijah was in the hospital lobby with his father when he overheard the chaos. He froze, the same instinct gnawing at his chest as when he'd seen Charles on the monitors. Something told him this wasn't ordinary. "Dad," he whispered, "they're going to lose her if someone doesn't look deeper." Samuel gripped his son's shoulder tightly. "You've already made enemies, Elijah. This time it's the governor's daughter. If you're wrong—" Elijah shook his head, eyes blazing. "I won't be wrong." and before his father could stop him, he pushed toward the guarded room. The doctors immediately tried to block him. "Not this again," one scoffed. "You've embarrassed us once. Leave." But the governor, wild with desperation, noticed the boy. Aren't you the janitor's son who saved Whitmore?" Elijah nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, and I can save her too, if you let me try." The governor hesitated, his pride warring with fear. Finally he barked, "Fine, but if this boy's wrong, you're finished." The room fell silent as Elijah moved to the girl's bedside, his eyes scanning her trembling form, her erratic breathing, the flicker of her vitals. He noticed something strange, a faint rash around her wrist where a new hospital bracelet had been clasped. His mind raced, connecting patterns. The seizures weren't neurological, they were allergic, but not to food or medicine. Elijah leaned closer, sniffing lightly, and caught a faint metallic scent. "It's the bracelet," he whispered urgently. "It's nickel. She's severely allergic." Gasps erupted. No one had thought to check something so simple. The bracelet was removed immediately, and within minutes her breathing steadied. The seizures ceased. The governor's daughter opened her eyes weakly, whispering, "Daddy?" The room erupted in stunned disbelief. Cameras weren't there to capture it, but word spread fast. Twice now, the janitor's son had seen what 15 doctors had missed. The governor himself hugged Elijah tightly, whispering, "I owe you my child's life." And once again, Samuel stood in the corner, tears streaming down his cheeks, not from pride in his son's genius, but from the unshakable truth. The world finally saw Elijah not as a janitor's boy, not as a poor black kid, but as the mind that could change lives. And deep inside, Elijah knew this was only the beginning. The weight of his gift had just begun to unfold. After the governor's daughter recovered, Elijah's name spread beyond America. Foreign news outlets called him the boy with vision beyond science. Prestigious universities sent full scholarships, some even offering to fly private jets to pick him up immediately. Research labs promised unlimited resources, and tech companies whispered about partnerships that could make him a billionaire before he turned 18. But behind the praise, Elijah felt a chill, because for every hand stretched out to lift him, there were others reaching to own him. Samuel saw it too, watching envelopes pile up at their doorstep, each heavier with money and expectation. Soon, government officials arrived. They spoke in rehearsed tones, asking Elijah to join special research projects. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes were sharp, calculating. "With your insight, we could prevent national disasters, stop pandemics, even predict medical crises before they happen," one official said, sliding a contract across the table. Samuel bristled. "He's just a boy. He doesn't belong to you." The man's smile thinned. "With all due respect, Mr. Brooks, geniuses like your son don't stay in shadows. If you won't guide him, others will." Elijah listened quietly, but his chest tightened with unease. At the same time, darker forces were moving. A powerful pharmaceutical company whose billion-dollar drug Elijah had exposed during Whitmore's crisis sent men in tailored suits to corner Samuel after work. "Your son is dangerous," one sneered. "He costs us millions every time he opens his mouth." "If you care about his future, keep him quiet." Samuel clenched his fists but said nothing, fear rippling through him. That night he found Elijah still awake, sketching new ideas on scraps of paper. He wanted to tell his son everything, but he couldn't bear to break the fire in his eyes with the weight of threats. Charles Whitmore, still recovering but stronger than before, called Elijah and Samuel to his estate again. Over dinner he said gravely, "You two need protection. Fame is a double-edged sword. People will worship Elijah in daylight and plot against him in shadows." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've seen men destroyed for far less than what Elijah carries in his mind. If you let others own his gift, he'll lose himself." Elijah stared down at his plate, the truth pressing against his young heart. For the first time, he wondered if being a genius was less a blessing and more a burden he had no choice but to bear. That night, standing on Whitmore's balcony overlooking the city lights, Elijah whispered to his father, "Everyone wants me to save the world. But who saves me?" Samuel wrapped an arm around his son's shoulders, holding him close. "You don't have to belong to anyone, son. You just have to belong to yourself. As long as you stay true, the world can't break you." Elijah looked out at the glowing skyline, knowing storms were coming. Storms of power, greed, and danger. But somewhere deep inside, he felt a spark of strength. If his gift was meant to change the world, then he would fight to make sure it changed it on his terms.